All right, let's do this.
Possibly. I love doing business model projections, which is why I'm here. I have a background. I am a professor of accounting and entrepreneurship, and have recently gotten into entrepreneurship over the last 5 years and helped our department, well, not the department, the School of Business and Economics, helped the dean sort of create the financial system that would help him move us from 96% dependent on state funds to where we were when I stopped that, which is 60% dependent. And that was a lot of fun. And I decided that we should continue this and that I should continue this. So in actual fact, Josh and I were talking, and I said, this wasn't Josh saying, oh, would you come and talk? It was me like, is there some time when I could talk to you guys about finances? So that's why I'm here, and hopefully you guys will find this useful. Figuring out finances is fun, really. Well, it is for me. I mean, the reality is I love this stuff, which is why I'm here. And it's not as difficult as a lot of people think. There are ways to make it difficult, but what we're talking about today, which I hope will be useful, is sort of small scale. If you have your own business, if you've got a smaller business, you don't need a lot of the bells and whistles and all of that. And the reality is, if you understand what drives your business, you can do your finances, and that works and helps. So figuring out finances is fun, really, despite the fact that everybody always tells me it's not true. And then there's who needs finances anyway? So these are sort of the three things that I will probably be touching on, mostly doing this one. But, why do you need a P&L, a profit and loss for this year? Part of it is, am I charging the right amount? In other words, am I making money? Is what I'm doing now working, or am I just digging myself into a hole? When can I hire another person or buy that cool equipment? That's something that a lot of people want to know, right? So that's one of the best reasons for projecting out, even if you're a sole proprietor and you're not necessarily going to go to the bank to get loans or anything like that. What is it that you need? When do you think you want it? And then what do you need to do in order to move yourself to that point, and being proactive about that? And then, will the money be in the bank to pay my bills, which is the cash flow thing, right? So it's all very well to say that I've got these revenues and these expenses, but if my suppliers require me to pay sooner than my customers pay me, I can be in a financial mess. And so those are sort of the three things that I focus on. I don't know taxes. So if you have tax questions, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to answer them. I've always focused on the decision-making side. And so these are the reports that you need for decision-making. And you should interrupt at any time with any kind of question or joke or the score or whatever. So, when does it become fun? We're going to create a business. I've created one sort of already to show you things, but we're going to actually block off some of that, get rid of some of it, and create a business that better reflects perhaps what you guys are doing. And there's a lot of similarity in what you're doing. And so hopefully we'll be able to build something that shows you the kinds of things you want to be thinking about or that you've already thought about. We're going to go through 5 steps. Step 1, what do you do and what do you need in order? Oh, sorry, I just remembered. Joshua, would you please hand out the slides?
Oh my goodness, of course, of course. I'm so sorry. Okay, thank you, Joshua.
And I'm sorry if it's too small to read. I didn't realize it was going to come out quite that small when I printed it. I was trying to avoid lots of paper, and good, thank you. But anyway, that way you can have this, you can make notes, whatever. I know sometimes it's hard to focus and really absorb when you just have a PowerPoint slide, bopping around. I actually process through writing, and when somebody talks at me, I have a really hard time absorbing the information. So I try to sort of give people various different ways of processing it. And, if you even want to just draw pictures, sometimes that helps, I finally started allowing my students to multitask because I realized I multitask in a meeting for that very reason. I can't do two things equally, but if I do one thing that's not that important, it helps me focus on the other one. So I will say to you the same thing I say to my students: feel free to multitask, but if it distracts your neighbors or it distracts me or you can't answer a question, it's not acceptable.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Anyway, so try to break it down into 5 steps, right? The first one, what do you do and what do you need in order to do it? You all know this, right? You do this every day. You think about what you need, what you do, and what you need. So then the next is, what can you charge or how do you charge, and what do the things cost? I would claim that you all know this as well, right? You've had to do it. Then to get into the projection, number 3, I want to say, well, if you're thinking out into the future ideal, what would you dream about? What would you ideally do? What do you want this to look like in the future? Number 4 is, how do your operations have to change in order to have that happen? Is it just a case of growing? Is it a case of getting another employee? Do you need a different space? Do you need to branch off into a different area? What is it that you need? And then finally, how can you get from now to the ideal? And other than the fact that I've thrown revenues and costs and stuff in here, you'll notice that there isn't a lot of financial stuff here. And that's because the financial stuff should reflect your business. And if you understand your business, the financial stuff should be relatively easy for you to follow. I'm not saying, well, if you don't think it's easy, that's your fault. But what I'm saying is that anyone who truly understands their business should have a financial setup that allows them to very easily translate. So it shouldn't be made so complicated that you're not able to figure it out. Because if you're an expert in what you do, then it should work, right? And a lot of times the reason it's a problem is either because, well, here, I'll show you why. Let's see, where is it? Because somebody throws up something like this and says, fill that out.
Can't see it.
Oh,
That'd be really hard.
it's the PowerPoint slideshow thing. I just need to turn it off.
This year.
No, or did it stop?
Oh, I got the picture.
Did it stop mirror?
Yeah. So strange.
I know about finances. I don't know about how to show everything on my computer.
Yeah.
It was actually just karma, right? The computer's saying they don't want to see this.
I want to see it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Start.
thank you, Randy. Oh, that's not the fun one. This is the fun one. So, somebody throws something like this up and says, fill it out. And if you're not me, then you kind of freak out and you say, I don't know how to do this, right? So this is a month to month for the first year and a quarterly for the second year. And then we have a 5-year projection here. And we have a cash flow analysis that suggests that you need to borrow some money or find some money because of when it comes in. And so one of the things I want us to do is I'm not going to worry quite so much about the cash flow or even the month. Well, you guys, I'm going to ask you whether you want me to do month to month or year to year. The year to year sometimes is easier to look at because there's only 5 columns. And then I am certainly willing to work with any of you if you want on how to do the others. But what I want to do is I want us to just follow these 5 steps, create sort of our own company just here, and think about it and show you how, if you're just thinking about it and you're following the 5 steps, you can fairly easily get to one of these, and it's not as bad as you think.
I hate to interrupt, but is there any way to pull the projector back to make that bigger?
You're not going to have to look at that much longer.
Okay.
We can.
The point is to scare you and.
I'm not trying to scare you. We can.
Smaller numbers are less threatening. Whoa!
That wasn't actually intentional.
I'm very, very not threatening.
Sorry. We're not actually going to be using this one, so I won't even worry about fixing it. No, but you're right. And when we do it, we'll highlight the sections so that we can look at them, because otherwise it is. I've never yet found that you can get the projector far enough back. Oh, you can? Okay. So basically, what we're going to do is we're just going to walk through these steps. And before we start walking through these steps, in case we decide we want to pivot, tell me why you're here.
I came kind of from my own personal bookkeeping that's going on right now that I'm not tending to, but this is what I'm going to want to have this knowledge and this picture.
Bookkeeping is good, and I can help with that.
But I'm thrilled about all of this. I came to get a handle on my day-to-day bookkeeping. I have a system. I'm using it, but it doesn't no good if you don't look at it.
Yes, using a system that you don't want to actually follow through on makes it a not very good system, no matter what it is. Neil.
Well, I'm just here to hear how you're bringing that fun to it. I mean,
You're challenging me, right?
there's the basic discipline, I think, of doing the bookkeeping, and then it's certainly it's just understanding that in a lot of ways it's not that it's a lot of work, or it's an amount of work, and it's customizing it, and filling in tax returns, filling in sales tax returns is just painful, and so I'm figuring out ways of not doing that by not selling the goods.
I'm not sure that that's the most profitable way of approaching it, but it certainly works. What about the rest of you?
I have sort of a backwards approach to figuring out how to approach my finances and figuring out budgets for things, and I'm constantly reassessing, partially because I need to and partially because I like it. Is that weird? Like I like figuring out, how much do I need to make, how much do I want to make, and then kind of figuring out from there, okay, how much do I charge for my stuff, or how many hours per week do I need to work, so that I figure out how much of my energy I can put into other things like WIMP, where,
I paid her to say that.
So,
That's exactly what this is.
So that's where I'm at a half a year. So.
Well, thank you.
I had to ground you. I couldn't let you guys.
Yes, Joshua.
I am I'm ashamed to say that I was a freelancer for about a decade. I ran a startup, and now trying to run WIMP, and at no point in that 12-year timeline did I have a sense of how to work finances.
Despite the fact that you had an office in the same building with me for at least a year.
Right, well, see, and
I didn't know.
It only lasted a year for a reason.
Oh, well.
So this is very good for me to learn. Yeah.
You should see his spreadsheets though. They are colorful and impressive.
A lot of red.
My-
Sorry, Joshua.
Yes.
So, two different things, right? One is this is not about the day-to-day so much as the knowing where you are in the projections, although it helps you figure out how you want to categorize your day-to-day. The thing about the day-to-day is I'm not sure, Neil, that there is a way to make the day-to-day bookkeeping fun. I mean, some of us just are born that way and like it. But for example, I don't like doing day-to-day bookkeeping every day. You know, I could do it for a couple of days, a week, maybe. No, a month. Sorry, not a week. But, you know, I mean, I like the way it fits together. But the reality is one of the reasons I'm a professor and interested in entrepreneurship is because I don't want to be a day-to-day bookkeeper. I actually was a bookkeeper for a while. So there's some of that you just have to, like, you know, suck it up and do it. But there are ways, and we can talk about it offline or something. There are ways of making it easier. For example, literally having little buckets. And when you get receipts for things, you stick them in the right bucket. And then at the end of the week or whatever it is, you sit down and you watch a movie while you're typing the stuff in. In other words, you know, when my husband and I had kids and started arguing about the money, he doesn't like to spend money. I don't spend a lot of money, but I do like to buy books. We created a budget. My oldest daughter is 29, so this was a long time ago. And I first started doing, you know, my accountant best, and, you know, I did all the journal entries, and I kept, and then it's like, no. And then I just started sort of, right, because I didn't need that. And so that's part of it. It's like, what level of detail do you really need? You don't have to do it the official way if you can get the information in there in the way that is going to be useful for decision making and will keep you from going bankrupt and will keep you out of trouble with, you know, whatever state agencies or whatever it is. But, you know, as long as you take care of those, it doesn't have to be a perfect system. It just has to be something that will actually provide you with the information that you need. And so one of the most important things is to develop a system that works for you and not to necessarily just go out and say, oh, I'm going to do this. This is on the side. I used to volunteer when I lived in Atlanta for a nonprofit, and they had just converted to QuickBooks, a program that I absolutely hate because it can get you into trouble. But most people actually like it because they don't realize it can get you into trouble. Their accountant, using the term loosely, they didn't pay him very much, and so they didn't go out to get somebody super qualified. He would use it mainly as a checkbook. And so all he would do is to have it write the checks. And so the new director came in, asked him to print something off, and there was all of these amounts in these different accounts. And she said, what does this mean? And he said, I don't know, I didn't put it there. Because in QuickBooks, it will automatically fill in, you know, double entry accounting. You do one side, it'll automatically fill it in. It'll fill it in with what it thinks you should have in there. So if you don't tell it something, it'll still fill it in. And that's where, you know, you don't use something just because everybody say it's great. You want to make sure that you're using something that works for you. And, you know, the cash balance was fine. It wasn't as if there was any fraud, but it was totally useless for any kind of decision making because he wasn't paying attention to that. And, you know, so I, of course, fixed it. Sorry?
It must have been hard.
No, actually, well, it was fun. I mean, you know, for somebody like me, it was like a jigsaw puzzle. And so it was fun to go back and through. I don't know that I would want to do that forever, but it was a challenge. And, you know, it's always fun when you can use your skills in a situation where other people don't have the same skills. And so they're like, wow, that's great. And so, you know, you sort of feel really good about yourself. So, okay, so the other part of it, to me, the reason why this is important, is that like time? Do I have 5 minutes left? Coffee. The other reason to me that this is important is actually for what Joshua said. And you will all be in more or less of that situation, right? You either really understand it or not, but it's critical, particularly as a small entrepreneur, startup, as a sole proprietor. It's critical that you understand what drives your finances, not because finances is, you know, the be all and end all, but because if you don't understand that, and if you don't understand how what you're doing translates into that, you can end up, you know, going bankrupt or not doing well without really knowing it. And it's not because you don't have a good idea or a good business. It's more because you just didn't really attend to certain things, that because you didn't realize what they were doing. And so, sorry?
Give an example
of
how this guy uses like, I do this much work,
well, we're going to see that, but here is one example is things like projection, right? So in other words, you know that you want to hire a second person in year 3-ish, or you can't beef up your business. But you don't necessarily know what that means in terms of the retention rate or the number of customers you would need in your subscription or something in order to give you the funding, and or what else might come along with that. Right? So it's that kind of thing. It gives you the sort of the clarity to say, if I want, it's what Melissa said, you know, if I want to do this at that time, what do I have to do to get there? Is it realistic? From the cash flow point of view, the typical one is you've got all of these revenues because you have all these customers, but they don't pay you for a month or two, and you want to keep them, so you're kind of letting them be a little bit delinquent. But all of a sudden, you know, everybody else wants their money. And so you find that you're either having to take out loans or going bankrupt, not because you don't have good business, but because you kind of allowed it to go on. So it's those kind of things where you just want to know. So what I want us to do is to think about a business. So here is what type of revenues, you know, I don't know what kinds of revenues. I threw up some things that, you know, my experience suggests that occur in some versions of your businesses, but let's come up with a business and decide what kind of revenue it has. So, and what kinds of costs. So spend a little time deciding what kind of business we want. And now I have to actually.
Anybody opposed to going for web design?
I think using a freelancer or small agency as an example is probably most universal for people here.
Is that the same as a web design company?
maybe a service that has service that has some monthly.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how the heck to get out of this thing.
You're out.
Yeah, I'm out. And the problem, of course, being that I wasn't really paying attention. All right, so what are we going to call this thing?
Acme.
Oh, come on, web services.
It's the beginning of the phone book.
Synergy holistic
Triple
service
A.
providers.
Artisanal web design.
Artisanal web design, AWD.
All-wheel drive, I'm okay with that.
And styles and cuts.
Okay. I'm afraid you're going to have to choose one name.
Let's go with artisanal web
I
design.
vote for that.
Yeah. What?
Artisanal web design.
Is that AWD? I'm not going to name anything artisanal web
But you're
design.
like an artist, but you're doing it day-to-day production.
And we're gonna do a 5-year projection, so we'll do this by year.
Could have been handcrafted. But
You'll be
But
fine.
that may not scale so well.
So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of everything.
Oh no, all our revenues.
Your revenues are gone,
No.
and so is your salary.
Damn it.
Yeah, there's enormous potential there.
You might say infinite potential.
You said challenge, I said.
When you divide something by 0.
Yeah, infinite and zero are awful close when you look at them in a certain way.
Okay, so step 1 is our business. What do?
We do client services for starters, right? So
So we do client services, and this is where I need to make it larger. Hopefully. I need to make it incrementally larger. Is that good? Okay. So we do client services, and I'm just going to put these notes off on because we don't know what we're going to do with them yet. Client services. What else do we do?
Hosting,
yeah, hosting.
Hosting.
hosting and maintenance, yeah.
Hosting and maintenance. Now, would that be together?
No.
Not the same thing, but they're both
Not
recurring
necessarily.
revenue.
Yeah.
Depends on the tiers.
So
Variations.
like
People
AWS
will
or
treat it differently.
Probably.
Do we do anything else?
Yeah.
Now, do remember that you don't want to be here all night with me, and therefore something relatively simple would be good.
That's all we do.
3 is great.
Yeah.
I think 3 is good.
That's all we
Good,
do.
great.
Okay, so we will have client services, hosting, and maintenance. And then we're going to go down to what kind of expenses do we have? Anything different from this?
Server costs.
Yeah.
That would go to our operating,
Equipment,
wouldn't it?
that.
Now, here's the thing: is a server
No, it's
operating costs part of our regular operations?
Yeah, it's operating
Yeah,
costs.
fold it all in, so
Scale,
your
that's fine.
subscriptions and things.
Okay,
like
so
that,
when we
you're
get
going to-
here, we're gonna lay out some of those details, right? So that we can detail those up and it can then roll up. So part of the thing that you have to think about is, what do you need on your summary page? What is it that you want to see in order to make your decision? If the server operating costs are a critical component that you want to be able to compare with the others, then you would want that as an individual line. If it's just, a group and you don't worry about it as much, then you're going to leave it as is. But that's going to be one of your decisions, is not just what kind of costs do we have, but what kinds of costs do I need to see? Because maybe they will move differently across time as I'm ramping up. Maybe the server costs move differently from the salary costs.
More variable and fixed.
Yeah, more variable, fixed, or variable in a different way. They vary with different things, that kind of thing. With salaries, it tends to be a step function, whereas if you were selling a product, you would have product costs that were definitely a function of volume. And so it's they just vary differently. Did you have your hand up, or were you just, okay. I tell my students, don't twitch. It's like the auction house. You twitch, I call on you.
I've seen accounting structures where they have like 605 or something like that as these different sort of categories. Is that relevant here?
605?
They have like
He's
different.
talking about
numbers.
account numbers, I think.
Oh, what it is that if you're doing this in a system, a database system, they will have what they call a chart of accounts. And so this could either be your chart of accounts, or this could be a roll-up of your chart of accounts. And because computers tend to like numbers better than the way people type in words, then we put numbers for our chart of accounts. And we put the numbers in a way that organizes them automatically so that I can have all of my revenues in a block. So all my revenues might be, I think typically there's something like 5,000, all my expenses are 6,000, my assets are 1,000, my liabilities are 2, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
And so they use that to identify them and then to order them. But we're not that complicated, so we don't care. Okay, so now we have this, and now we have to actually figure out what we do. So we're going to take a look at the first year. Let me go back to, you guys have this, I'll just leave it in this mode. Step 2 is estimate the amounts associated with these things, right? So the next step is just to say, okay, you already know what the amounts are. Now, the way I have this built, because it's the way I like it, is that at the top of every backup page, I have a summary. And these things feed up into the summary. And this is only important if you want to build a spreadsheet this way, but just so that you'll know what's going on. That way I can play around with the assumptions that I'm using down here. And as long as the total ends up here, it will flow into all the rest. And I can then see what happens. So anything I put in, let's see, $1, $2, anything I do here will automatically flow up to client services. And then it will automatically flow into the client services here. And that way I can easily play around with my assumptions to see what will happen if I increase the number of clients that I serve. Okay, so we have clients. Let's play with a couple of them, but not necessarily try to fill out the whole thing because I think it's already 8. How do you charge for client services?
It could be hourly.
Per hour or per project?
Yeah.
What do we want? Do we want per hour, per project, or both?
When it's per project, it often boils down to hourly. I mean,
So
For simplicity's sake, do we want to say $100 an hour?
So we're going to have rate per hour, and we're going to start off charging 100 per hour. Is that, I had billable hours down here. That was in my design services. I should have just. How many hours?
What's the period? A week or a month?
Well, this one's a year, but we could do it. We could do it. We could treat this as if it's the first 5 months if you wanted to do months. But if you're doing an annual projection, it would be per year. On the other hand, you could tell me how much per month and we could multiply it by 12.
So, I mean, in terms of billable hours, we're talking obviously less than 40 in a week. I mean, because there's going to be hours that are spent speculative in marketing and sales, things like that. Right. So,
with about 105 a month. Billable hours.
How much?
105.
105?
Yeah.
So we're going to say 105 times 12. So we're going to get 126,000. That's an awful lot.
No, it's 1,206.
Depends how many hours you work. Depends what your rate is.
Well, that's good. You guys are working hard.
Yeah, that's also counting, 12.
Yes.
No, that's per month. So yeah.
So that's some project pricing there too, where we do have a package like a flat rate for a product that's deliverable over several months or something.
You could do that. Do you want to do that, or do you want to just leave it here for now and do something with hosting and maintenance?
Let's do that. Let's add something to the mix. What can we do like $600 for a package that's one unit?
Okay, so I don't understand what a package is. Is it part of client services?
Yeah, it's a service.
So we're gonna also have,
You could put it under maintenance, because you could think about maintenance in the same way. So maintenance is a certain
so
amount
what
that
we
you
could have is
per month.
package services.
That works? I don't wanna.
Yeah.
It's still your.
Yeah, perfect.
And then we're gonna have number of packages. And then price per package.
Do like 7 a month.
Okay, so 7 a month, 7.
I don't know if we want to get. I don't know if we want to get this complicated, but often there are various like service levels for clients. Depending on if it's like bare minimum maintenance or actual like proactively.
I can stay here until midnight. But that is the kind of thing you guys want to think about. In other words, if we were doing this for each of you, or if we have a workshop where I'm helping you each do this, that's exactly the kind of thing that you want to think about is, do you want to add that in? And so laying it out like this, so you then have the option of doing it, and you can always zero it out if you say, I'm not going to do it. So how much is the price per package? Did you say 600?
This is our high-end product, so this is like 697. Which are medium.
And 99 cents.
No, 49.
And what about hosting?
So hosting is, I mean, depending on, that's per client,
Partially an expense as well.
right?
Yeah, but that's not.
And we'll get to the expense part. So
Yeah,
how
so
much
what
are you
do you
going to
charge
charge
the
for
client?
hosting?
Like $30 a month.
Yeah, it's a good average.
Just flat?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So $30 for client. Number of clients, is it the same clients as these?
Typically, yes.
So these are billable hours though. So this will have to be number of clients. Sorry?
It includes probably a lot of those plus, additional ones from past years.
Okay, so that's one of the things that you can also do. I mean, because these things can get as complicated as you want them to, or as detailed as you want them to, I should say, which is that you can then have it, you can put those numbers in a box along here, and you can have it compiling them so that you can just have it feeding in. But how many clients should we have?
Let's say we've got 20 clients paying $30 a month.
Okay. 20 clients. Because we don't want percent retained. $30 times 12. Price per year. Yeah. You don't like that. Okay, so what we now have is we have our first year in our revenues, right? And one of the points I want to make there is that you're figuring this out based on what you know you're doing. And so it goes both ways, right? Trying to figure this out also helps you figure out more about what you're doing, what you're charging, does it make sense? And knowing what you're doing helps you figure this out. So a lot of times creating a model like this, even if it seems painful to do, can be a really good way of helping you figure out what you understand about your business and what you don't. What you need to look at in more detail. So we have this, and we have our first year, and it flowed on, and that's great. Now we're going to go to operating expenses. Are we just going to have one person?
For tonight, that probably makes sense. Yeah.
And how much are we paying this person? What'd you say, Neil?
Yeah, that's usually how.
Well, how much do we want to pay this person?
$60,000.
60,000? Now, whoops.
That's an employee, huh? Oh, yeah.
No, that's proprietor. We don't have any employees.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's lots of room for business development.
Yes.
And then I'm afraid you have to pay benefits.
For the one employee, which is a
For yourself.
sole proprietor.
Potentially.
Depends how you set it up.
I'm going to give you benefits. And part of what you're going to do then is you're going to look at this, and then when it's in the red, you're going to say, what can I back off of?
Yeah.
What don't I need to do? How can I adjust this so that it'll work?
So you're covering yourself by thinking of yourself as your own employee, huh?
Yes. Well, if you're a sole proprietor, you either get a salary or you get the profits, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, it's like you don't want to make it zero profit and then you're not covering. So this is also a way of saying, if I can't in the long run earn at least this, which is the minimum salary I would accept from another company, then I don't want to be my owner. So, you know, it's a way of sort of giving yourself a benchmark, but then you could give yourself, you know, the first 3 years without any, if you have savings or something like that. So it's all about sort of setting it up so that you can then, how are they doing?
We're about to.
We're about to win. Do we need to take a break?
I love that, though, looking at yourself as your own employer. Would you?
Well, that's what you, when you're a sole proprietor, you are your own employer. So keep that in mind. When you are, you don't get to deduct your insurance benefits, but you are your own employer.
But that also feeds sort of the taxable idea of
That's right.
something
Yes.
that's a benefit.
Yes.
It's something that
Yes.
is good in salary, and you've got to represent that.
What?
What do you mean you don't deduct your insurance benefits?
If you're deducting it as an individual, you don't deduct it as a business. If you deduct it, companies are not allowed to deduct it. Sorry, this is life insurance. You're not allowed to deduct life insurance payments if the company is the one who benefits. It's one of the few things I know about taxes.
But health insurance you can deduct.
Yes.
I'm curious where your 40% number came from.
It comes from, it's the number that we use at SSU. Many people have like 70% and some people don't get any benefits. So it's just a number, and it really is a function of your package, right? And, you know, if you're a sole proprietor, it could be really expensive, or you could do what my brother-in-law did, married my sister, who then worked as a mail carrier and got great benefits, so he didn't need it. You know, so but again, you're setting this up with the idea that if you're a business and this is the ideal, these are the things you would pay for. And then you can go back and say, well, what should I get rid of? Because I don't need it. Maybe I have somebody in my family who already is getting benefits. You know, maybe I don't need that much salary because of whatever, right?
And the idea too, is that we're coming up with some assumptions and that we would do more research to like sort of dial in those numbers.
Yes.
We can pull on the levers to see,
Right.
you know, what we can, like I said, what we can back off.
Right. And it is 10 after 8, and I'm not in a hurry, but I know that I can get carried away. And so I want to be very cognizant of your time. So I'd like us to get to sort of the end completion of something, at least within the next 20 minutes, so that anybody who wants to then sort of phase out or go home can do so and feel that they got something out of this. Space. Are you going to work at WIMP space?
Heck yeah.
Definitely. Full time.
$225 a month.
For full time, yeah.
Okay, now this is operating costs. You don't really need utilities if you're working at WIMP space. They're paying for you. That's why you work here. But this is where.
Cell phone or something, right?
Yeah, I don't consider that a utility. I realize that I probably should, but I don't think of it that way. But you're right. So we could have phone, we could have insurance, we could have supplies, but this is where possibly the hosting,
Web hosting, yeah.
web hosting, because you said that was part of.
And not to cost that.
So server costs.
Right.
Is it server cost or is it web hosting?
One and the same.
It's not one and the same.
So it appears in different places though, doesn't it? I mean, when it's an expense, it's a server hosting, when it's a customer oriented, it's a hosting package.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
But some other name.
So to you, it's a cost. To them, it's a service. So how much do these cost?
Uh,
100 a month.
yeah, I mean.
100 a month for
Say about
phone?
80 a month.
Well,
Much internet as I do.
But you're doing something different there. You got to do it down to what's your average cost per
client.
client and the way you're representing it. So you need to
Well, this is just phone, and that would be your own phone.
This is your yearly operating cost. So it's not based on what your client, how many clients you have.
Right, so you got to figure out.
So you gotta.
You
split
could
these
probably get
up
away
between the people,
with
but
paying $100
you're already
a
kind of
year
doing that
for
in your
your own
client
website,
services
like
cost.
at a minimum.
Okay, we just did phone. We're
Right.
walking down this in a systematic fashion. We have not yet gotten to server costs.
If you're doing IT, you have insurance,
Kind of a similar.
Insurance.
not so much with web stuff.
100.
I'm not sure what you said.
No, I didn't say, hey Siri.
Insurance per year.
And we can leave it
600 a
blank.
year
We
would
could
be
just
one
not
number.
have insurance.
For insurance that I paid,
Sorry?
600 a year I paid before.
Okay,
But
let's
that's
just
not
do
really web
600.
stuff, that's
Because
not
remember,
really
this is
billing.
fill-in, so we don't have to agonize over it.
600 a month right
Server
there.
costs. What was it? Somebody, one person, tell me server costs, and all the rest of you don't argue.
$45 a month.
Oh, that's really low.
Well, that's good for line out.
If it's for
Oh my
one
god, you
server.
guys, seriously, come
Yeah,
on.
but.
Supplies.
There's other stuff.
Did you not hear the don't argue part? Sorry.
You're talking to a bunch of nerds about
Supplies
not
are
to talk about
$20 a month.
servers.
Yeah.
Let's think
Yeah.
about that for a second.
Well, see, I didn't actually mean the finances were fun. I meant that it was fun for me to harass you guys while we were doing
We
this.
might have been able to put the insurance at 0 for web stuff, and then the server cost would be higher.
And so you can do that when you go on back, but I want to get to at least
Supplies are
grow a
$20
little.
bucks.
Okay, what sort of supplies are we
How much?
looking at?
20 bucks.
Office supplies, $20 a month.
Sure.
It's like,
We're all
remember
online. I
this?
don't use paper.
You know,
That's
Where's
it.
all your subscriptions for
Very
software?
little.
Yeah, that'll add up.
Yeah.
Several hundred.
That's not a
Well,
supply.
actually, I've got the subscriptions for software here.
Ooh, see?
What do you mean, see? You don't have to be.
What?
Never mind.
I'm saying nice
Yes,
things,
yes.
but you've already thought about all these things.
Sorry, Melissa. Okay, do we want any marketing? Are we gonna market ourselves?
No.
Yes.
No.
We write on reputation alone.
Let's ask somebody who actually has a business
I market. I give thank you notes. I give referral presents.
about how much
I
would you
spend
think?
about $150 a month.
Okay,
Oh, that stuff, sure. I thought we were talking about
That's
ads.
marketing.
yeah, it could just
Yeah, I
be,
guess so.
you know,
Yeah.
general marketing. Yes, I would definitely say that stuff is marketing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we now have our costs. So far we're doing well, right? 191,090. But perhaps we haven't really gotten to the expensive part, right?
Yeah.
One of the things you need to think about with the equipment is how much are you going to buy a year? It's less of an issue on the yearly than when you get to the monthly, because the monthly it'll be very bumpy, right? Maybe you have a monthly subscription on software, maybe you buy it all in 1 month and it's good for X. And so then it becomes very lumpy, and so you just need to remember to put it in only in the times you need it. And then that's where some of the cash flow issues are going to come into play, because you need to have enough.
The equipment can be on 2-3 year cycle.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Exactly.
New
So if you
computer every
spend
2-3
if you
years.
spend $3,000 on a computer every 3 years,
1,000 a year.
1,000 a
Yeah.
year.
And not much
1,000
of
bucks
the
a year.
software.
Well, and here what you
licenses for-
would do is you would potentially say, okay, we're not going to have any video equipment, right? Because we're not doing that.
Where to go?
Oh, look. Sorry, Randy.
All right.
Do we need
But we
equipment?
have fancy monitors.
Oh, yeah. Well, every once in a while.
Tours, etc.
I would
So
say-
here what you do is you put the full amount in the year you're going to spend it. And then if you don't do it for another 2 or 3 years, you don't put it in again
3K.
until later. 3K?
Yeah, a year.
No.
No, for the
Every
first,
3
for the
years.
first year, you buy
Every
you buy
3
something for
years.
3K.
And then
So
you-
your
And what
next-
about
your next
monitors?
couple of years are 0.
What about
Yeah.
monitors?
600,
Yeah.
got two really
600
fancy.
every few years.
Yeah,
And what about your software? Let's not worry about what I put in there.
75 a month for Creative Cloud. That's Photoshop.
Is that all?
Yeah, plus like, put 100 in.
Put 100 in? Okay, so we now have something, and I gotta tell you, you know, you guys are doing well. You've made, you've made 70,000, I'm pretty sure,
Not realistic at all.
because, I'm thinking that our revenues are perhaps a little overstated.
Probably. Well, it's probably that the revenue's definitely overstated.
I think probably the client services and maintenance are actually being confused. So like the number I gave 105, that's just billable hours. So that works towards maintenance contracts or service contracts.
Right.
You know,
So do we wanna change that?
a lot of times.
Let's change
you're-
the
You're doing
hours.
well if you're billing client services for 20 hours a week, and that's hard.
Yeah.
20 hours a week?
It's usually 15.
So let's say 20 times,
That sounds close to
52.
reality, Yeah,
Yeah.
20 times 52?
because the rest of the
That's
time
fair.
you're doing other things, to run a business and market,
I was
and deal with your equipment. Yeah.
That's fair.
Anybody would be happy with this?
Now again, to
That's-
Ben's point, that there's both maintenance and client services are tapping into a limited resource, which is your time.
Yeah.
But
So
that's-
perhaps we need a second, do we want them part-time or full-time in order to take care of this load?
Probably
A
yeah.
part-time minion.
Starvation wages,
For a
come
while.
on.
Oh.
Brutal capitalism.
Not starvation,
I'm just
they're
kidding.
also running their
Yeah,
own
Melissa,
company.
Melissa, I'm sure you know all about this.
Oh, shh.
Okay.
I don't do it anymore.
We're gonna leave it as it is, but
Yeah.
currently I'm thinking that it's pretty overstated, but that's not all that surprising. And that's part of it, is that then you have to then go back and say, well, what's more realistic, right? So the next thing one does
It's 20 almost.
is to say, where do you think you want to go? So let's do this just with the numbers. We won't bother to build in the assumptions. What do we think our ideal, it's not video revenue anymore, our ideal client services revenue would be when we get to this, to our dream company?
So your rate per hour is a lot higher. Your time per period is probably about the same. So maybe 150 per hour.
Well, will the market bear that much more of a rate?
My clients would
Depends on
wanna
what
see
your
that.
services are.
You
Yeah.
know?
You know, it's like basic development, probably not.
No.
But like I'm moving into strategy, and people are like, yes, please, whatever you want.
Because of value.
So yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
what's
So-
the value that they're going to get from
So
the
basically you're saying that you think you'd like it to be about 150,000. And one of the things we're gonna do then later on is, when you do this, is to say, how do you get there? If you assume that the number is the same, right? Then what rate do you have to charge in order to get yourself up to the 156? And how would you do that? Would you increase it, 110, 125, 140, incrementally? Would you just jump? Would you do it instead by possibly, instead of, maybe you think 125 is the max that it will take, and so then that implies that you need more customers.
I think probably we're looking at actually package services is where we need to
Oh,
optimize, not hours, because that's hours, and there's just so many hours that you can work. But when you
Yes.
start to do package services, you can start to optimize your efficiency.
Well, and so then what you're saying,
Exactly.
then what you're saying is, in client services, you're not going to do the 150. You're instead going to stay at maybe 120 here, and you're going to grow your package services.
That's 12,000.
You don't want to go down?
Now you're really being realistic.
You know, so maybe this goes up to 175 or something like that. And then you ask yourself, so how you do it. But notice that you've already started doing that conversation, because the whole point is that you start here and then you start playing with how you get there. And you think, that, we must have won.
Shit, I think we won.
We just won.
There you go. That's why there was explosions.
Wow.
They wasted no time.
They were like,
They're a little ahead of the stream, actually.
And I don't know how much more you want to do with this. I mean, because I think you've got the idea, and I don't want to keep you to. I'll play with this forever. So I'm sorry that I keep apologizing. But it's like, so then you play around with this, and you do exactly the kind of conversation that you're saying, right? Because you say, wait, in order to get up to there, I would have to do this many more hours. That's not realistic. But if I do package services, I could do it. Or I would have to do, charge 150. I can't do that. So it's exactly that kind of thing that allows you the advanced planning to say, okay, that means that at some point, in year 3, I'm going to want to start transitioning a little bit more towards package services or, whatever. Or I want to bring somebody on board who's going to be really good at going off and doing this other type of service. So that to me is the advantage of the ideal. How much more do we want in hosting?
well, if we have our employee managing it, we could bump up the number of clients. Price per year is probably going to stay fairly consistent.
Yeah.
So bump it up to twice it?
Yeah.
Just see what happens? Twice it. You're replicating me and I didn't say it right. Double it. That's the word. So then you move on to the operating expenses and you say, okay, if we're going to have client services growing at this rate, package services growing at this rate, and hosting growing at this rate, what does that imply about what we need? So we've already agreed that we need another employee. So do we now have just 2 employees? 2 full-time employees? Do we have 2.5?
I think there's another conversation if you're doing that is looking at the way your client is growing and what's the trigger point.
Yes.
And so it's really being able to monitor exactly what is your business doing to be able to say, hey, I'm going to start needing to take on somebody in 2-3 months' time.
Exactly. And so one of the things that you can say is ideally, I think in order to match that kind of business, I'm going to need 2 full-time people. And then you say, when would I need to bring them on? Right? When is that trigger point when I would actually need to bring this person up to full-time or fire this person and hire a full-time, right? Because you're right, it's that trigger point because people are step function. You can't just increase, well, you can, I guess, with part-time, but typically with the kind of expertise that you're looking for, it's either going to be half-time or a full-time or something like that. And so it is that.
Virtual assistants, does that change the picture? Thinking of like VAs and hiring people kind of piecemeal versus like that be an incremental, you just put that in another expense
if you're doing it as a virtual like that, then the question is how many hours are you hiring? And what it mainly means is that you could potentially do it less in a step function, that you could hire only as much as you needed. Now you may get the trigger point when you need a lot more hours given who what you're trying to serve. And so it's that balance. Is it what you're doing that requires all of a sudden a lot more, or is what you're doing also incremental? And if you hire incrementally, you can match that. And so that's part of what you'd have to figure out. And whether or not there are going to be people of the right skill set in the virtual community.
We have a comment from the online audience.
What?
Debbie Smith says, I think you guys are trying to drive the poor woman crazy.
Yeah, we can't have this somewhere here. It's up on Hangout. Yeah, we didn't plan on it.
So Debbie, Thank you very much, but I got to tell you that I thrive on this. Anyway, so that's the kind of thing that you want to do. So then you can go down and notice, much to Melissa's dismay, I have down here that at some point you might want to have your own place.
You know what you could put in under the employees is just knowing the ebb and flow of it, and you get this huge crunches. Is you probably have to have a contract person periodically budgeted for during the year, because you get huge jams of work all at once, and you end up having to.
So you'd have an employee 2 type person, which would be a contract person.
Yeah.
This person you met at the space.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's right. That's right. It's the networking. It is often feast or famine, and so being able to build that into your model.
And
will be
this,
very helpful
then
to
you
have
might
this.
want to put down here, number of hours for the contract person. Is that how you, so this could be number of hours in a year, say that you expect to have to hire them.
But from a model's point of view, it's saying that this could happen, and therefore, if I'm paying somebody 120, but I'm charging them 150, it's not going to work out.
Right.
And that's actually a really good point, because part of the thing that you're doing here, remember how I said it's that, are you charging enough? Is your price high enough? If you think on average you would typically need 50 hours of contract during the year or something like that, you need to make sure your revenues cover it. If you want that to be covered by certain services, then you need to make sure those services cover it. And so you would set up a slightly different spreadsheet. But if you're hiring that person to help you with the overflow, it's really, you're making sure that your general service price is covering all of the help that you need. And you can average that a little, because it's not necessarily, Joshua's fault that you're also trying to serve Shelby and need to get a contract person because you can't handle it at the same time. So you don't necessarily want to charge Joshua extra and Shelby extra so much as you're going to charge everybody slightly more to accommodate the fact that you need a contract person. And so you're just incorporating that in. But that is a really important point. And that's part of what this does, is to say, if I can put in what I'm going to need, I can figure that out better. And it gets to, when you do the month to month, if you're then blocking it on, okay, these are the months when when I have found that I'm apt to have the heaviest business, then that's what you would put in there. And it also helps you figure out when you're going to have to hire that person and how much cash you'll have to have in the bank to make sure that you can pay that person that you hired. Does that make sense? All right, so let's. Not that I'm feeling at all.
Here and not out there.
So do we want to rent our own space, or are we going to continue our flex thing? And the reality is we only have one flex membership. I guess our other part-time employee is just doing it at home.
But the importance is, if you can do a flex, you've got a fixed cost that's very narrow. So it's much better to do it that way. If you start getting in your own, you've got a whole bunch of other costs that you never even thought.
So you're for sticking with the flex and maybe buying 2 flex memberships to accommodate the 2 people?
I think it's just understanding what the costs are.
Yeah, so 50,
Yeah.
100.
Yeah, so.
The management free, I mean, why take it on for?
Well, I mean, it's a really good point, because you have to then worry about utilities, you have to worry about maintenance, there are a bunch of other things. On the other hand, some people like having their own place. So if you were, if you're not necessarily, I shouldn't say this, I don't know about web designers, but say you were somebody who really needed to have a certain aura, or needed people to be able to walk in and see the product, then you'd want your own place. Sorry?
No pants Thursday.
We don't have that here.
I have that.
I mean, as much as possible, I think, that sounds nice.
Wear a skirt on Thursday.
But most of us are freelancers, and even if we contract out people, we're all working from home, basically.
Yeah. So, we're
Right.
very distributed.
Yeah, all the.
So basically, it means you could get a couple flex partnerships or something like that so that people could come here on a regular basis, but you don't, it argues for not having your own place, which Melissa would like.
The wet stuff, yeah.
And so then you can go through this and, you know, maybe it all has increased. On the other hand, with the phone, maybe it's decreased. You never know.
What if you're paying for your second employee's phone?
Ah, that's a good point. So maybe we now need times 2. And one of the things you could build in there is if you're paying for a phone, you could have the number of employees built in here, and then you could have the cost per employee. Does this go out on the web, all of the background?
Yeah.
See, they're actually cheering me.
It's funny because it's
Yeah.
true.
It's going to be tough.
We are having the most fun out of everybody.
Yeah.
Do we need more server? Because we doubled our hosting, right?
Yep.
So what's that?
Double it.
No, you can get a bunch of sites. on one.
Twice it.
It's coming down.
Twice it.
Twice it,
But
twice
if they
it.
do well, you have to get it anyway.
I'm just gonna
If you choose-
twice everything.
Double all the things. The server costs per unit comes down, so you can expect it to remain flat, but you're gonna want it.
For the interest of time, I'm going to just double everything. And so now we have doubled things. And
Still have revenue.
the last, we have the revenue and we have this, but we haven't bought any more equipment. Do we need more equipment?
Certainly.
Yeah.
We would have read that.
Multiply
So
by
I'm just looking at
1.5.
Multiply by
year.
1.5?
What are we looking at per year? Is this?
We
is
know
this-
that
is
we
the
need-
ideal, like per year ideal?
It doesn't have to be per year. It is where you want to be. So it could be that you need to build up to the point where you can buy that amount of equipment.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't necessarily have to pay that all the time,
Yeah.
but you can say somewhere between, sorry, you can't, see, somewhere between year 1 and ideal, you need to be able to accommodate this.
Yeah.
Okay?
You guys are all trying so hard to pay attention.
They are paying attention.
It's fascinating.
You know, it makes it easier to pay attention because, you know, you've got all these distractions that help you focus. Yeah.
Beer for dinner, I recommend it. Highly recommend. I think you're gonna be the second.
As long as you have dinner for dessert. Regular dinner.
Anyway, my recommendation is that anybody who wants to stops here, and that part of what I will do is I'll take these assumptions and I'll actually build a growth model into it and send it to you guys, and you can send it out to everyone. So that you can see. And then, you know, because the thing is that what this is down here is what it says. It's cumulative, right? So it means that if you have this much, and then you notice we made 80,000 because we had all this revenue and we didn't actually put any expenses in, but it's great. I really like that model. I recommend it highly for everyone. But it then tells you, what I like to tell my students is that this one can go negative in a year. This is your bank balance, it can't go negative.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the ways of saying, if you know that you need a big influx of equipment, then you don't have to worry about whether every year you could cover it. But for example, you could put it in 2018, and it's okay if it goes a little bit red for 2018 because you'll have the bank balance to cover it. And so again, that's the other aspect of it that allows something like this to really help you, is because it helps you figure out how to build up to get more equipment or whatever it is you're wanting to get.
Unless you find you're getting into a server farm business.
Yeah.
In which case you want to back out of the
Yeah.
cost.
May I be able to catch right home from anybody here? I think it's possible.
Any questions? Yes,
You built this in Excel,
yes.
and I can't build this in Excel, so do these have templates that you can download? Like you change some of the things, but I can imagine filling this stuff in, but I can't imagine actually building this template.
I will build you a template. In other words, I have a template that I use. You want the template to be tailored to what you do because you may not want 3, you may want this to be 4 things instead of 3. But I will send it. You can use this one and tailor it, or I can tailor it for you. I love doing this.
I think
You know,
in order to take a template like this and suit it to your needs, you probably just need to know how to like insert rows and columns.
Yeah.
And to know
do
where the
simple
formulas
math,
are.
Which just
No, she's
formulas.
she's doing sums on setting them up for certain. I can't do that part,
So-
you know.
Well,
feel
you
like
can't do
you're
that.
not-
You can't do that part without help.
Right.
Meaning that, in other words, you don't really understand what I've done, so you don't know yet how you would do it.
When you throw a new row and you need to modify the equation somewhere in there.
Yeah. But I will be, and this is one of the things is that I will be sending out what we've done so that you'll have it, and then you could alter what you have, or I will come out to you and help you do that. And then Joshua was saying that we should have a workshop where you could come and actually build it, and I would be here to help you build it. One of the things
So we can come to that workshop.
That there's probably a SaaS app that does all this very nicely and elegantly. Yeah.
there is not a SaaS app that does this because I don't like any of the apps out there. There may be a SaaS app that you would like to use.
You know about Zero? I don't even know Zero does, but Zero's pretty.
Zero does do some of this. Yeah.
I think one of the
Kirsten was speaking to the point earlier that even if there is potentially something out there that does all this, it helps you understand it better to actually put it together
Do it
yourself.
yourself and plug it all in.
But I'm not going to argue with whether or not you should do an Excel on your own like I do or use that. You do the one that's going to work for you. Anybody who wants one like this, I am more than happy to help you build it or to build it for you. And that's free. I mean, I don't mean to make it sound funny, but I mean, I'm not offering to sell you my service. I'm offering to help you because I love doing it and it doesn't take me very long. It's just kind of fun. And one of the things that I've done when I've built it with people is that I have made color. I have put the cells that you change in color so that you don't accidentally delete a formula. Right? So it's like if these are your assumptions, I'll put those in color so that you know that those are the ones you want to play around. And that way, if you change one of the others, you know that you can change the formula, but at least it's really obvious to you. But it is the case that it's the process of going through this kind of thing. And there are apps out there. And if you're happy with one of them, it will help you do this. The thing that I haven't found is the ability to figure out exactly what kind of assumptions you want to put in. And so, a lot of them don't have the flexibility to figure out exactly what kind of assumptions you want and how you want it framed. But you may decide that you don't need that level of detail.
Another way of thinking about it, at least the way that I'm thinking about it, is that this is like learning arithmetic before using a calculator, so that I know that I'm not shooting myself in the foot by not understanding what's happening underneath the hood.
Yeah, it's visioning too. So you're getting a big vision of what all those apps can do. But if you can really vision out, you kind of know.
So I think if I were to translate for myself what you said, it is you don't need to do it the way I've done it. If you are looking at this and understanding it, you can use one of the templates because now you understand better what comes in, right? And as a result, so that
so you're not flying blind with those apps.
And the reality is that it doesn't use very much that's complicated about Excel, which doesn't mean that I'm saying everybody should be able to do it, but I'm saying that if you actually really did look at this, all I'm doing is doing multiply, divide, sum, and then, you know, having it fill up. So it looks a lot more exciting than it really is. And so I think most of you would probably find that once you got into it, you could easily adjust it for yourselves. And the question is just whether you want to bother, right?
This makes me excited, I just need to say, like.
I got a hell yes.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Yeah.
But it is the case that sometimes, you know, I would love to be there for you because you could be excited now and then try and do it on your own, and then all of a sudden it's not quite as exciting. Yes.
So, you said, you know, the fun part. Do you find this fun, or do you find the projection that you talked about that you were gonna?
I find it all fun.
Okay.
The projection is a lot more fun because it's more exciting, and you know, it's. I'm not sure we could have gotten there in one setting, even if I had tried, because part of what I wanted is the conversation. Because to me, the conversation that you're having and even the arguments, I mean, not the arguments, the questioning about what the assumption should be is part and parcel of it. And that to me is also fun, right? But the notion that you can do this and then you can figure out exactly when you could hire another person, when you could put in how many, like the point that you were making about, well, how much would I have to charge? Or, okay, I can't charge that, but I could do it through the package services, and seeing the potential in your business and allowing you to sort of figure out the path to that potential. To me, that's exciting. And so I do consider that fun, but you know, maybe you don't.
Do you suggest folks go back and like look at their history? Because like I have pretty detailed records of my history. I've never really looked at it in this way, and so I can see great benefit in kind of parsing that out and going, oh wow, they were really, that particular aspect of my services was not doing well that year.
History is good if it teaches you something. So that's part of what you have to decide is it worth going back and looking at it because you think it will tell you something moving forward, or have you kind of learned what you needed to from it? You know, in other words, are there things that didn't go as well and you don't know, or you're not sure? Then it might be a good idea to do it just so that you don't make the same mistakes, you know. But on the other hand, if you kind of feel like you've learned from your history, then just moving forward is fine. History is only useful if the SEC is making you report it. if it teaches you something. It's only useful if it teaches you something.
Yeah, thanks for that, because I already have a rough idea.
Yeah.
Look forward.
Yeah, I mean, forward is where you're going, right? So you only look back if you need the assumptions, or you know, maybe you think the growth pattern is going to be similar, and so you want to see what the growth
that was
pattern
part of my
was.
consideration.
Yeah.
Some of these numbers were just like, oh, this.
Right.
Or like
And you can see,
when
you know,
contracts are
so
good
that
and
kind of thing is very useful and doing that. But again, you want to not turn a lot of time just doing it for the sake of doing it. That's the kind of thing I would do. That's the kind of thing I consider fine. But,
If it's
you know.
the same business model too, it might be good to look back, because you can continue to fine tune it, but if things are changing, it matters.
If it's a way to help you really understand, because it's the same kind of business, that can be useful too. When I first, let's see, you know, it's funny because Joshua is saying that, you know, this is the last one for the year. Well, my year is an academic year, so my year ends in June. And so I'm thinking, what? This is the last one for the year? No. But I started doing the financials for the School of Business and Economics in February. And the person before me didn't really know very much about finance. She'd been hired for her management skills. And I ended up going back and redoing everything from July 1 because it was a way for me to really understand and make sure I knew what was going on. So sometimes it's useful for that purpose, but you want to make sure you're doing it because it's useful and not just because you think you should.
Yeah, well, one of my tenets of running a business is you have to understand those pieces to be able to know where you need to optimize or
Yes.
what services to drop or not.
So I would say you should do it because it sounds to me that you've already convinced yourself that it would be useful.
Yeah, totally.
You know, I mean, so, any other questions?
Cool. So we will be getting a workshop on the calendar in the next few days here. We're just getting dates finalized. So just make sure you're signed up on meetup.com to get that notification.
And I have a few business cards if anybody wants to take them, if you wanted to check in at some other time, not for the workshop. But I'm also Kirsten Ely at Sonoma State. It's Kirsten.Ely at Sonoma State, at sonoma.edu. But you can always find me on the website directory and email. Don't use the phone. I don't actually ever answer that phone. It goes to voicemail and I don't actually remember what the password is. It's KIRSTENEELY.
And we'll be posting these models to the meetup.
Right, and my cell phone is the one that I use. And if I send you an email, it's in my email, and if you ask me for a card, it's on the card, so.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you guys for staying. You stayed a long time, I appreciate it.
This is valuable information. So we have.
Was it at least not quite as unfun as you thought?
Oh, that's awesome.
Better than unfun.
I was in.
It was better than unfun? All right.
Yeah, involved.
We have one finance book, and it's not really a finance book. In fact,